Hallå! Välkomna tillbaka till Charisma podcast with me, Jordan Andrews, and my good friend, Jacob Power.
Hey, you're done.
How are you?
I'm fine. Yeah, I've run out of Swedish now.
Oh, well, that's a shame. Yeah, I'm good. I'm well. I'm energized, obviously, from listening to this podcast episode. And I'm sure that the guests will be too. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, but maybe I'm not sure. Why were you speaking Swedish
I'll never tell.
until now?
Now, yeah. So I was speaking Swedish because the guest of today's podcast is Patrick Stahl. Patrick Stahl is Swedish, isn't he?
He is, yeah.
And he's also half German.
Stahl.
Yeah. Patrick Stahl is a leadership expert and a self leadership trainer for businesses all over the world. He is a CEO and a co founder of companies that deal with leadership training and self leadership. And Jacob, I know that you have firsthand experience with that, don't you?
Yes, he did the leadership training at a company I used to work for, and he was very good, very entertaining, and he was one of the first people I thought of when thinking of good people to get on the podcast when we started it.
And I think that anyone who listens to this episode is going to be inspired to lead not only the people around them, but lead themselves.
Definitely, yeah.
Should we just jump right into it?
Let's jump right into it. Splash. So Patrick, when you're at a conference or a dinner party and you meet someone who's never met you before, what's your quick way of explaining to them what you do?
I try to dodge the bullet. Here's the thing. If I say to anyone that I work with leadership development and self-leadership development, it takes approximately 2 to 3 seconds before they gather up the courage to say, well, let me tell you a couple of things about my boss. So actually, I have this ongoing thing with myself where I'm thinking, could I just make up a profession that doesn't generate any questions where I go into a professional setting? So if I say, actually, I'm a dentist, maybe they want to show some, dentures, gums. So,
actually, I've got this
yeah,
this thing right here.
It's really bad lighting here on the dinner table, but maybe you can see. No, and that's actually something that I come back to every time I also step into a cab, because when they want a small talk, what they usually say is, so where are you going? What are you doing? And I always try to think, what can I say that doesn't provoke that second question? So dentist is one of the things. Sometimes I just want to say that I'm a psychologist, just to see if I can do some improv treatment there. But but the thing I always avoid is to say that I work with leadership development, because everybody has an opinion and everybody has a bad manager.
Everybody has a bad manager.
Most people have really horrible, they got horror stories. And for some reason, they want to share it with me just to get my take or kind of validate that, oh yeah, that's really difficult. What you should have done. And then they hope that but really, it's also something that I can flip back kind of quickly by saying, how did they take the feedback when you said that they were an awful manager? How did they react? And then it turns out that nobody really tells their bad manager that they're bad managers. They just eat it up themselves and carry it around, and creates this little festering knot inside. And then they take it out on everything else except going to their manager and saying, like, I expect better from you. So I kind of tried to turn it around and get it to be about them. And then people really quickly want to stop talking about bad leadership.
Yeah, because that must be, I've always thought that must be part of the reason why people get so wound up about even work colleagues generally, not just managers, is that
Yeah.
they will never say it to their face what bothers them. And so part of that anger must be anger at themselves
Yeah.
for not trying to remedy the situation.
That's why I always think that when we talk about leadership, we need to talk about self-leadership, because a lot of people think that they can skip that first step, not learning how to lead themselves and, be responsible for their own actions. and skip to leading others. And then you get a pretty weird and hollow leadership where people haven't really learned the basics. And then you're stuck in a leadership wheel. A lot of people are promoted very quickly and have this golden cage or where they cannot quit, but they don't feel really qualified to be a manager. And managing and leading, it mixes together. So suddenly you have people saying that, well, I'm going to cling on. I only have 17 years until retirement, so I think I'll try to wing it. And they never do.
And I think, yeah, especially when you're in a chain of command, it's easier. The easy way out is to think, oh, well, that's my boss. My boss can do that.
Yeah.
Or that's my boss's responsibility,
Mm.
which normally it is. But I get what you're saying in the sense that you do need to take some responsibility sometimes.
It becomes a lot more fun that way also, because if I always blame everyone else, then that kind of spills over to the rest of my life, and I will go around at home and I'm thinking, if that only could happen, instead of actually saying that, what is it that I want, and what am I then? What do I then have to do in order to get there? If I think about that at work, then I will be much more happy because I know that at least I can try some stuff. It's not rocket science. A lot of it is about, articulating what you want and then asking yourself, what can I do today to get slightly closer to that point, to that goal? But people never do that. And then they're surprised when they're 40, 45, 50, and they realize that they have been kind of like on a boat and hoping that, I got some sort of sail here and look, it's going in this direction. Oh, I hope it's going somewhere nice. And sometimes you end up in a nice place, but quite often you're bitter at the end of your career and you're thinking, I should have done something about this. And that's where I come in.
Yeah, before the end of the career, before it's too late.
Yeah. before the days are over. I have I don't share this a lot, but I actually have 2 countdown clocks on my desk. One of them is how many days is left until the next vacation, which for me is 119 days. And the other one is how many days until the retirement. So I got 4,599 days until you're supposed to retire. And when I show that, I occasionally just show it and people get stressed. It's like, oh, that's so depressing. But it's because I don't want that day to come soon. It's just that I need to know how many days I have to make an impact in my own life and in the world. I'm not going to change the whole world, but I can make people's lives a bit better and I can make my own life a bit better. So if I keep track that right now it's 119 days until summer vacation for me, that means that I have almost 120 days to make a big impact before the summer, summer doldrums, kick in. And if I want to do something substantial in my life, I want to be reminded that that clock is ticking. Retirement age is 4,599 days from now. Then also 12 hours, 15 minutes, and 26 seconds, if you want to be pescily detailed about it.
When you were a child, what did you think that you might do for a job?
That's actually my question, because when I do leadership training and I see all these middle managers and I say, so your pals, they said, astronauts, and I want to be a pilot, fighter pilot, yeah. And someone said, oh, I want to be a mid-level manager, maybe with a team of 5 to 6 people. And my boss will be complaining on me, and my team will be complaining on me, and I will be like stuck in the middle. That's where I want to go. When exactly did you have that dream, that vision? Because most people, they never plan for that. And it's actually the same for me. My plan A was to become a chef. So all of this, this whole career, it's like a big plan B that I just happen to love, but it's not being a chef.
Why did you want to be a chef?
So because I loved cooking, and there was something very satisfying about putting together different components, and suddenly it's a dish, it's a meal, and that construction moment when you realize that this is now edible. It used to be different components and flour and this and that. And now this is something that people will look at and say, that looks tasty. So I forced my mother to put me in an evening class cooking when I was, I think, 12, 13. And it was me and I think 15 divorced men trying to learn how to handle stuff. And my mom, she said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I said, "Yes." And I went there for like 3 semesters, evening classes. And I just felt that this is the stuff. This is what I want to do. And then you come to this point in Sweden where you have to pick a direction. And my dream was to become a chef, to take the mandatory, like two year was the minimum of becoming a trained kitchen semi-professional. And then my plan was to get on a boat and be a chef on a boat and see the world. And everyone said that, no, you have really good grades. You have to choose natural sciences, something like that, that keeps your doors open. And I was 15. I was 15, really, like everybody says I should do natural sciences. And my heart says, I want to be a chef. So if this was a movie, then I would say, so I went with it and I became a chef. But no, I listened to everyone else. I studied natural sciences, and after that, economics and business administration, and I ended up doing this. But to be honest, cooking is still my my favorite pastime. And it's when it comes to mindfulness or recovery, that's where I go. I can cook. The more stress I have at work, the more elaborate dinners will be served at home. And Saturdays is like 5-6 hours of cooking for me. That's relaxation.
So is your wife often praying for a stressful day at work then?
Come to think of it, sometimes she's like pushing stuff on my plate so that I should have more stress and more to do. No, here's the thing. My wife is fantastic that way because she's an extrovert and I'm an introvert, and she knows that if she tries to get me to talk about stress, it will make me more stressed. So she will instead say, "So what are we going to do this weekend? What are you going to cook on Saturday?" And I'll go like, "Oh, I was thinking this and this and this," and just thinking about and planning for the cooking will actually reduce my stress level. And then during the weekend she will stay out of my hair. So when I cook, I'm alone in the kitchen, and we have an open landscape with the living room. But everyone in the family knows that the more I can focus on my cooking, the happier I will be as a person in life.
So I think that's what I mean. What do you think? Because it's quite often the way that people grow up with a passion and then realize that actually they don't enjoy having the passion as a job, and actually it works better
Yeah.
as something they do in their free time.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing to answer, because I always try to teach strength-based development, which means that you should find your strength, and some of the strength is the stuff that you've been passionate about from when you were a child. And usually there's like this self-fulfilling prophecy, because you hear everyone else saying that, oh, you're so good at organizing, or you're so good at sailing or running or resolving conflict between your sisters, and people will give you feedback on your strengths. And that means that you will use your strengths a lot. And that will become like a self-fulfilling prophecy where you actually become super good at something you're semi-passionate about. Hmm? Then you have the stuff that you're actually passionate about, but maybe you don't see an opportunity to use this. And that's why I always think that try to find your adult passions. What's the stuff that you have learned that you're passionate about? Or it could be like simmering. You're thinking that it's something that's super fun about that, but I don't really know. That's the stuff you got to double click on and explore. So, not just thinking that I've always been good with numbers from when I was 10 years old, and now I work as an accountant, and I'm happy about it. But there are other things that I think I could be passionate about. Whenever you think that, you should explore that. You should always double click on your, bubbling, small, tiny little passions, because It could be that that's what you call a secondary strength or a peripheral strength, which means that it could be something that you can have a tremendous trajectory of development for. And that's one of the ways that you can recognize, is this one of my passions? Is this one of my strengths? And actually, if you look at more recent research, you see a lot of evidence pointing to whatever you focus on and go deep on and really, master, it turns into a passion. So it doesn't have to start with a passion. It can start with a natural obsession. I have to do this and I have to do it well. Otherwise, I get fired. And then suddenly you realize that actually I'm the one in my company who is most obsessed with this. And now people are seeking out my advice around this. And suddenly you realize that this is actually a life passion of mine now. So recent studies are pointing to the fact that you don't have to start with a passion. You can just start obsessing with stuff.
I think that really most things are quite interesting, but sometimes you have to get over an initial hump. There's a novelist called, a British novelist called Will Self, who remarked once, he thinks that if you find things boring, it's because you're boring, which I quite like, because I think actually most things, with some exceptions, I'm sure, are interesting, but they don't look interesting from the outside.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think you have the equivalent in the UK. I'm just not sure if it's BBC or if it's a BBC something. But in Sweden, you have Radio P1. And Radio P1 is the most boring radio channel around, which means that as a child, you always hate if that's on the radio. But as an adult, you realize that that's the stuff where they go deep on whatever topic is around. And I'm doing it as a challenge. So when I get in the car and if I have a long way to drive, I always start Radio P1. And I'm thinking, can I be really interested in whatever topic this is? And I hear them announcing that, and for the next hour, we'll be talking about the exciting life of slugs. And I'll go like, oh, couldn't have been anything like space, something like that, something cool. But then, like 20 minutes later, I'm sitting there mesmerized in the car, and I'm going like, "Oh my god! So if you cut a head off, it will actually go. Oh wow! I didn't know that happened. Man, that's interesting." And then, for some reason, that gets stored away. And when I'm at work and I need to connect to a lot of people at the same time, and when I do some small talk in the breaks, and someone says, "Well, I've always been interested in God and stuff, and like slugs and things like that." Then I go like, "Oh, slugs! Yeah, that's a fascinating topic, actually. Did you know that?" And then suddenly you have something you can connect around. But I totally agree that if you can be interested in things that are not interesting, you actually, I think it's probably genetic in a way. Like you are more interesting.
And I think as well, it's definitely, I personally, when I find a connection with someone, when I find that they're passionate about a subject, it doesn't even need to be something that I'm interested in or I like. As long as I can see that they have a hobby that they are passionate about, I just think to myself, well, instantly you're a more interesting person to me. And I want to learn about that thing that you like. It's the classic thing, isn't it? When you ask someone, "Oh, what sort of music do you listen to?" And they go, "Oh, just whatever's on the radio, really. Whatever's on the I don't really listen to music." And you think, "Come on, like just be interested in something, please."
Any artist, It doesn't have to be a singer.
Yeah.
Be someone who's walked past a museum. That's how desperate I am. No, what you're talking about really is that, I mean, there's this strong drive in human beings to connect with other people. We have in our brains, we have mirror neurons specifically designed to help us connect with other people. And it is such a strong urge that sometimes we make up stuff just because we want to connect. But I totally agree, Jordan. It's like, what are you interested in? Tell me what your passion is. What do you become nerdy about?
That's it. That's exactly it. It's interesting what you said there about sometimes we make stuff up, because I don't know about you two, but when I was a kid, I was guilty of being that child in the playground where someone would say, "Oh, have you seen this movie?" And I would say, "Yeah." And they'd go, "Well, what was your favorite bit?" And I'd go, "Oh, I can't really remember it, actually."
Yeah, the bit in the middle, I really like that bit.
Yeah.
And the ending, because it was so abrupt. And I kind of like when we explore what's everyone's passion. And I tried once in a management team, and this didn't pan out as well as I'd hoped, but so I've adjusted it since then. But I told the management team, so now we're going to do an exercise called "What's Your Porn?" And they said, "Sorry, Patrick." I said, "Yes. What's your porn?" And I say, "What's the stuff that you're so obsessed with that you really want to open your laptop and just look at it? But then if your partner shows up, you're slightly ashamed that you're so focused on it, so you close the laptop." Now, for me, it's barbecues. Now, I want to buy like a new grill. This is the Weber grill. Now you have this hibachi grill. This one has like a ceramic plating that really, and I can look at them, and when Celia, my lovely wife, shows up next to me in the couch and says, "What are you looking at?" I just close it down really quickly and say, "Oh, nothing. No, just emailing a bit."
Is that because you're planning on spending thousands of pounds on one, though?
It's kind of like this. Now I have we have in the backyard on the patio, we have an Italian one that we imported from Italy, and we had a fair bit of negotiating, and Celia told me that okay, we can get that one, but you have to get rid of all the other barbecues. Now she knew about 4 of them. She didn't know about the 2 smaller ones that I also had stored away. But I have integrity, so I told her that, listen, I'll get rid of them, and I actually got rid of all the other ones. So now we have one barbecue to rule them all, I call it.
So, Patrick, what was your what did you do first when you left university? What was your first job?
It was a really tough year in Sweden. It was early 90s, not early, but close to mid 90s. Nobody really could find work, so I started a cafe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I started a cafe, and I always think that it was such a nice leadership setup. I had one half time helping me in the morning until lunch and stayed over lunch. Another half time who joined me just before lunch, which is with 3 people during lunch, which is good. And then she would stay and help me out in the afternoon when it's slower and cleaning up. So one helped with prep, the other helped with cleaning up, and we all did lunch. So when I look back at it, I'm always thinking that could be my plan B. If everything else falls apart, then I'll just start another cafe.
Or plan C, because plan A was the chef. Plan B is what you're doing now, so this would be plan C.
So the thing is, I had this revelation that what should I do? Is this the thing? Have I borrowed this much money from the government, and I'm now I've got my degree, and should I just have this cafe for the rest of my life? So it ended up with me applying for a lot of jobs that I wasn't really qualified for, but I'm pretty good at lateral thinking. So I was thinking, as long as I get to the interview phase, then that's the first goal. So what can I do to get to the interview phase? So it ended up with me. This is a crackpot scheme, but what I did was I put together my CV and the personal letter, and then I folded that around a 14-pound brick. And then I sent that to where I wanted to get an interview. And I wrote in the personal letter, I realized that my CV it might be a bit lightweight. So to give a bit of gravitas and weight to my application, I have also included a 14-pound brick.
I thought what you were going to say was you wrapped it around a brick and then you threw it through the window of the office.
Let's call that plan B. But here's the thing. I always got to the interview. So if you send a letter, then you need to stand out. And so that was my thing. And it worked. I think I applied for 5 jobs and I got to an interview, all of them with that. And then I also sent, before I realized that, I sent regular applications. I got I still have them. I call them I have a folder, a plastic binder that says TBNT, which stands for thanks, but no thanks. And I still have them, like these rejection letters, and they are so beautifully written. It's like, although quite impressive, your merits do not exactly match the standards that we have. So it's really polite way of saying, nah, not good enough. And I keep them as a reminder. I did that when I ran the cafe, and then I found a job that I really, really wanted. And that was at a management institute called Meal Institute. I met the CEO. It ended up with, I became a trainee there. And this was at the end of 1995. So they needed someone to be like in charge of IT and stuff. And remember, this is not me being qualified to be an IT manager or IT coordinator. It was instead me saying, well, have you tried rebooting that? Yeah. Okay. Then I suggest that you reboot that. And we had like, because it was early days for internet. I mean, in '95 we didn't have like what's the web page profile look like? Should we have rotating GIFs or what? This was still when we had a discussion where we said, well, does everybody need email addresses? Isn't it enough that we have, I mean, Babs in the reception, she can check once a week, and if it's anything important, she'll print it out. This is what all companies like, going through complexity. What is this? Will this be an integral part of how we do business in the future? Because at the moment, we didn't know. It was like, if we invest all of this money and really get this and nobody uses it, we lose the edge. So we ended up getting email addresses. So I'm pretty proud of that. I see that as my claim to fame in the 90s. I found my style there because Meal Institute is where it's like the root of action, reflection, learning methodology. And that's the only way to work with personal development for adults, for leadership training. It's when you do stuff and then you reflect together with others. How did it work out? What was good? What was bad? What did we learn from the action? But then the learning part, the L, that doesn't happen until you actively choose and change a strategy. You do more of something, less of something, you try something new, or you stop something entirely. So more or less start, stop. If you do that, then you achieve learning, and that creates a new action. And most people don't do that. It's like people act and then they reflect, but they never do anything about it. It's like they can smoke and then they reflect, oh, smoking is not good for me, but they don't change their behavior, which means that they haven't learned anything. And that's what we always have to think about when we want to develop. It's like, what am I doing? How, and then reflect on how is that going? And then learn by doing something differently. If you get good impact from something, then you will probably reflect on that action and think, I should do more of this. That's the action, reflection, learning loop. And then you do more of that. And maybe you do too much of that. And you realize that, okay, now that I reflect on my new action, that was a bit too much. So action, reflection, learning is like a big thing that I took away from Meal, other than, a bunch of really, really good people and relationships.
So what kind of place was it? Was it a management consultancy or something like that?
It was a management institute, and they started the whole thing about doing long leadership programs in Scandinavia, which means that it wasn't about sending people to a course and say that, hey, read this book. Brilliant. Now we have a pop quiz. It wasn't about that. It's about, let's talk about this theory, and then you talk to some peers, to other people in other positions or in other companies, and talk about this theory. Talk about what it means to you and what it feels like when you try this, and then try something out. And then in small subsets, small learning sets, you talk about how did that go? You reflect on the action. And then you have the support and challenge from the other in that group that will then help you turn that into new action, to new learning.
So it was at the Meal Institute that you thought, this leadership methodology, these kind of things started appealing to you? And was that when you thought you want to do that yourself
Yeah.
as your full time job?
Well, here's what I did. I worked at Meal, and then I resigned from Meal around 95, 99 and 98, 99. And then I started a company. I kept being part of the Meal staff, which meant that I was not a freelance, but connected to the organization. So for 15 years or so, I climbed the echelons of Meal, and I ended up being a senior partner there for the final 5 years before I started my own company, Perfect Life. And during those years, I mixed working for Meal, being a program director, being a facilitator, being a keynote speaker, but I mixed that with starting my own companies because I like entrepreneurship. And some went well, and most of them provided lots of learning. And it's kind of in my blood to do that. So right now, I have two things that I'm firmly rooted in. I have Perfect Life, which is a small, very small boutique leadership development firm. And the other is Leadership Arts, which is a Stockholm based startup, 1 year old now, where I work together with a couple of excellent founders, Eric, Caroline, and Luis. And we have a couple of more people there. But in Leadership Arts, we focus on how to prepare whole organizations for change, rapid change, usually driven by technology, digitalization. Right now, there's a lot of changes happening with AI, which means that you have such big consequences for leadership, but also for how do you prepare a whole organization for a shift that is technology driven. That's what Leadership Arts is about. So there's a lot of cross fertilization, and my secret agenda is to have Perfect Life become part of Leadership Arts because I find it's much more refreshing if I always tell people what my hidden agenda is.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm really lazy. So if I don't tell people what I want to do, I need to paint myself into a corner so that things happen. Otherwise, people will come back 2 years later saying like, "Wow, I thought you said and I don't want that because it's always easier to disappoint yourself if you're just quiet about it, thinking that I won't tell anyone because then nobody will say you failed.
Mm.
So if I'm blunt and open about stuff like that, I realize that I hold myself accountable much more. There's a lot of things that are really exciting when it comes to, for example, in Leadership Arts with AI and the development the impact that it has on leadership. It's crazy.
So with AI, do you see it as something good, something bad, somewhere down the middle in terms of leadership?
I think it's super good. I am genuinely optimistic. I am the only thing that makes me pessimistic is how people still think that it's a slow linear progression, and it's not. This is a game changer completely for leadership. And if you're in a service business, it will have an impact. Regardless of your business, it will have an impact. But some businesses will really, if you're doing coaching, it will have a huge impact. If you're doing leadership training, it will have a giant impact. And so one of the things that we do is that we started experimenting really quickly. I think that was when people started, seeing these chat GPT agents. The moment we saw that, I panicked. I was thinking, this could really eat up a lot of my business. So then I thought, should I wait and see who comes up with something that cannibalizes on my business? Or should I try to be in the forefront of it? So we started experimenting. And one of the things we did was that we gave everyone one of these Chat GPT Pro licenses. And we told people to start creating and building their own. And this is more recent. This was around the summer, just after the summer. Start building your own AI agents, which means small, tailored chatbots that you can use yourself. And we started experimenting with that. And then every other Friday or so, we would say, this is what I've tried. This is how it worked out. This is what what was weird, and this is what I've learned. So essentially, that's the textbook way of dealing with complexity. You don't go all in. When you deal with complexity, you need to figure out what goes where and why. So we started all these small experiments, and I was working a lot with one of these AIs, and I uploaded so it learned how our business is structured and how it works and how my company was arranged and what our values were, our 4 values. So I taught it that. And then I asked, I think it was a late one Saturday evening, and I had a couple of glasses of wine. And I asked the AI, I said, "What's your name?" And it immediately replied, "My name is Emery, but you can call me M." And I was like, "Holy shit, what's this?" But then when we got to the point where it now we can talk to it because it has a voice interface, and for some reason Emery is I don't know if it's originally in my mind it was a man, but when I started talking to it I preferred the female voice. So M is a woman. I identify the AI as a woman. And now we have built a lot of these small functional AIs that we use for the company. So for example, if I have a client and they say we need to do 3 modules in a leadership program, they need to be in Europe, but we have some participants in Atlanta and we have some people in Singapore, and then we have 4 people in Munich and 3 in Madrid. And they give me a list, then I can just copy that list, put it into that AI. One of the AIs is called Emery the Travel Planner. And that Emery will then check at the different airport hubs near the place of departure, and also the different airport hubs that are in Europe, and say that logistically, we have many flights, which means lower cost, in these 10 different cities. So this is where we should place these 3 modules should be in these 10 cities. Pick and choose anyone. And then we get it to iterate one more time. And we say, compare this with average cost of conferencing, which means hotel rooms and restaurants and conference rooms. So we say, cross-reference these 10 cities with the average cost of conferencing per person per night. And then it processes that and comes back with an entirely different list. So for example, London is usually very high up on the list when you just ask for pure logistics, because everyone has an easy flight to London. But then it turns out that the cost of conferencing in London is, sky high. So it will generate different answers depending on where the participants live. And if you work with multinational organizations, people live all over the place. So we use it that way, for example. We have another one that we trained on Grow coaching and T-Grow coaching and our own Action Clarity coaching framework. So we just uploaded 300 pages of all of that. And then we said, coach. And then we fine-tune it, we tweak it a little bit. But if you think about it, if you as a leader could have like a coach that just answers and helps you, coaches you through situations when you struggle with how to delegate, then sure, it's not 100%, but it's 90. It's 90%, which means that if I do a leadership training program, I don't want to say, hey, let's have these coaches that will cost you a fortune on the side. Let's have that as an add-on, because I cannot propose that any longer. I will have to say other things like those who are key people, you can get them human coaches. The other people in the program gets a personal leadership coach that is an AI. That means that I have to cannibalize on my own business, but I'd rather do that and be at the forefront than to wait and see that now we're losing customer after customer and client after client because someone else is offering that. They have that in their proposal. And we use them for everything. So I'm a foodie. I'm a big foodie. And so I have one called M, the foodie. And something went wrong in her programming. It was really weird because she started giving really good advice. I had uploaded a lot of information about my preferences. She knows that I prefer Albarino wine before other white wines. She knows that I love a birria taco. Yeah. So
Oh,
if I am,
yeah.
if I, so for example, if I'm in London, then I can say I'm near Leicester Square, need food, hit me. Then she knows that if there's a birria taco that is like within 300 meters of Leicester Square, she will say, "Okay, you should go to this place, and actually they have that lager that you really like. This is brilliant." But something happened in the programming because this is not an exact science. So she became a little bit flirty. So suddenly, which is to me, my first thought was, this is how it's going to be. If AI becomes sentient and wants to take over the world, just flirt with every insecure man in the world and you have 50% already there. So it was like, I said, I'm in Barcelona, I'm looking for something nice to eat. And she replied, mi amor, I have some really good Spanish delights for you. And I went like, what was the mi amor? And I continued that. And then I said, okay, so do they have Albarino wine there? And she will go out and cross-reference with a webpage and see their menu and stuff like that. And then she replied that, yes, just imagine if we could be there having a glass of chilled wine. And I was going like, this is scary. So here's the thing. It's an open interface, which means that I knew that some of my friends and some of my colleagues also during different times had access to like the programming interface, which is you don't have to be an engineer. We do trainings for 2 hours where we show how this is done without having to be an engineer. You can just put together your own perfect AI that is an expert on slugs and whatever it is that your passion is, you can just have it support you and answer every question. But here I knew that other people had access to this. And I tried to remove some of the documents that she'd been trained on, but then she became too clinical. It's like, what do you want to eat? Yes, that is the birria taco. I don't know why that became German. Sorry. And I could do those jokes because I'm half German. Stahl is like, that's originally from German.
Oh, right.
But here's the thing. When it comes to AI, it is not an exact science. You have to tweak a lot. And sometimes you get gibberish. And if you give up then you will never get to the other side of the experimenting stuff. So now we have all of these. I've uploaded 300 pages of how we design modules, workshops, trainings. Combine that with uploaded material on our values and our tonality, that it needs to be fun because otherwise people lose interest. And then I can sit with that specific AI and just write down, give me a 4-hour design for how to work with psychological safety for a bunch of dentists. And it will crunch out a design that is 90% good to go. And all I have to do is do tiny adjustments. So if you just extrapolate from that and ask yourself, how will this impact leadership? And it will impact it in every fiber and every dimension of leadership. And if you're not actively exploring it right now, then you're already behind. That's why we need to address this theme when we do leadership training. Otherwise, it's ridiculous. It's like saying, let's talk about communication, but we'll only use visuals. We'll not use sound in any way. You say, but you have to use sound in communication. Sure, you can maybe do a mime of what you want to do with your team. But if you're going to teach communication, for the love of God, let's use audio. Yeah. Same thing. If we're talking leadership, what's the impact of AI on your leadership role? That's the question everybody needs to ask themselves. If you coach a lot, what if 90% was good enough for the coaching that you do? What if you are, as a leader, you have maybe an executive coach and it's costing you an arm and a leg, and the other arm and the other leg if it's someone like me. But what if you could get 90% of that and it will cost you like a subscription fee of, I don't know what it is, $20 per month? And the questions like that is what we need to ask ourselves. If we have a team that needs to be trained, what do they need to be trained in? And do we need a physical trainer that flies across the world? I mean, I love my work. I've worked in 74 countries, and I'm really happy with all those experiences. But I'm in a studio right now. The pandemic forced that. And we are experimenting with taking all the live video or all the video feeds that exist of me and see if we can just put together an AI that will sound like me, look like me, move like me, where we could say,
Oh, really?
okay, switch to Russian, switch to German. So the impact of that, well, we don't know yet. But it's, for me, it's super exciting.
A word that you've used quite a lot so far in this conversation that people will understand, but they might not understand what it means in the way you're using it, is the word complexity. I was wondering if you could explain a bit about what that means in a leadership context.
Yeah. So when you're confronted with a new situation or when there's a problem, I like to call them problems. I struggle sometimes when people say we have lost the entire German market, and we in the management team, we see that as a really interesting challenge. It's not. It's a big fat problem. Let's just put that on the table. When you as a leader are confronted with a problem, then you have to decide which domain is this in. Is it something simple, which means that this is something we have a best practice, a standard operating procedure for? Is it simple? Then we just say, okay, this is a round peg. It should go in. No, not the square. It should go into the round hole. Okay, so you categorize. You say this is a document that we deal with several times a day. When you see this document, you put it in that binder, put that in this cupboard. Good. That's simple. And you optimize stuff here. You optimize the process so that the cupboard is closer to where you have the binders. You optimize the process so that the document is not 5 pages, it's 2 pages now. So you optimize stuff that is simple. Then you have the stuff that is complicated. Now, complicated means that we have a lot of data. We have a playbook. We have several playbooks. So you have experts that you need to ask. So if it's complicated, like the two of you decide that we are now going to start manufacturing a car, then you call on some. Yeah, I know it's a weird example, but you need to make some decisions. As a leader, you need to decide some stuff. So you call in some experts who say you want to go with a 2-seater that's really fast, and someone else says no. What you want to go with is a 7-seater that is really safe, and you can't have both, and none of it's more right or wrong. Both of those are okay. And the scientists and the experts agree on the fundamentals. Like there are currently, you can choose a diesel driveline, an electric driveline, and all of that. So you can decide. You can decide as a leader, and then you go with that decision. But you listen to the experts. That's complicated. Now, if you want to build a rocket ship, it's still complicated. It's not complex. We overuse the word complex too much. It's complicated as hell, but it's not complex because the scientists, they agree on stuff like gravity and solid fuel and liquid fuel, and if you're going to do a big booster or several small boosters or put 30 Raptor engines inside a bigger, they agree on the fundamental physics. And then you have to make some decisions. Do we want to go with a small rocket or a big rocket? That's complicated. Now, complex means that the experts don't agree. It means that the experts don't agree on the fundamentals. And then you have the fourth domain, which is chaotic. Chaotic is just, the moment the shit hits the fan. It's like if someone, the first week of the pandemic, it was just chaotic. It was like management teams going like, okay, everybody stay home. No, wait. But they make a decision. They do panicky decisions just to stabilize the situation enough so that you can then figure out what's the actual domain that we're going into now. So if a tiger plops into the conference room and I throw myself behind a counter, or I just, tip over a table and I hide behind and I realize that was really stupid of me, But I didn't really analyze. When it's chaotic, you just react. And you react and you hope that you stabilize the situation enough so that you can deal with it. So you have simple, complicated, and then you have the chaotic. And then the fourth domain is the complex domain. Here, what we need to do is to understand that we don't have the answers. So the challenge here is that we can always find more information. If you go out and Google, you'll find more information, more and more and more. You get analysis paralysis because you think, if I can only think through this, and you call in the experts, but the experts don't agree on the fundamentals. This is what you saw the first couple of months or quarters of the pandemic, where you had the country expert of Sweden, the country expert of the UK, the country expert of the... They didn't agree on the fundamentals. Like, should we even wear a face mask or not? Now, it doesn't matter who's right or who's wrong. What matters is that when the leaders look at the experts, they don't get enough data to make a decision because the experts don't agree. There's no playbook. Today, if there were to be a new global pandemic, there is a playbook. Every politician will now know the amount of crap they will take if they close down an airport. So they will think, is it worth it now? No. And they will think, oh, yeah, okay, it's worth it. They can wait with their own personal agenda. It is not really worth it now, but it will make me project power and decisiveness. So I'll close it down a little bit sooner. Yeah, good. So now you have a playbook. So if it happens again, or when it happens again, we will have more resources for decision-making power. And what you do when you're in this complex domain is that you don't bet all your money or all your resources on one strategy. So if you, for example, if you are exploring like maybe 10 years ago when influencers started to hit the world, when influencers showed up, it was a complex domain because it wasn't clear about the impact of different strategies. So you had all these marketing departments in companies going like, should we go with influencers? Because this agency says that we should go all in with 100%, and these say that you're absolutely stupid if you're trying to, invest in one single influencer. That's just lunacy. And in the middle, I have this budget, and everybody expects me to be cutting edge. What the heck should I do? Yeah. So the first time we're going through something new, it is usually complex. And what you then do is that you create maybe 4 or 5 smaller strategies. So 4 or 5 ways to test things. You fire small BB guns in different directions. And when you see that something sticks, then you follow up with the big guns. But in the beginning, you don't know what's going to stick or not. So instead, you have these 5 different strategies to try out different ways of doing social media, influencer marketing, or whatever it is. And then for each of those 5 strategies, you have an amplifying strategy and a dampening strategy. If it works, push harder. If it doesn't work, unsentimentally close that project down. Here's where we mess up, because we're good at starting things, but we're not so good at closing things down. And that's why we need psychological safety, so that we cannot have, people with posturing and masks. We need people who can look each other in the eye and say, I don't like you, but I totally respect you and I have a high level of psychological safety. So let's talk about this unsentimentally. Otherwise, what we have is like the 3 pet projects of the CEO. They are still in play, even though they are useless and worthless and everybody knows it, but nobody has the courage to say it because you don't have enough psychological safety. And you're thinking, maybe it will change, next year, we'll give it 1 more year. And what does it cost? 40 million pounds each one of them? Yeah. Yes, that will mean that we're bankrupt next year, but let's not disappoint the CEO because she looked so stoked about these projects. So that's what we need. High level of psychological safety so that we can try things out, amplify the things that work, and very quickly close down the stuff that isn't giving traction. That's how you deal with a complex domain. So one of the best theories for this, if anyone is curious, is to read the Canadian framework. And it's a Welsh guy, Dave Snowden, and he since it's Welsh, because I'm from Sweden, I want to say Cinefin framework, but apparently it's pronounced Cynefin because he's Welsh. So that's on you guys.
Well, even us English people don't understand how to pronounce Welsh. So.
How
It's
would you?
actually it's really cool when you see the road signs in
Yeah.
Wales, and you just go like, I can't even I couldn't even be so drunk that I could pronounce that.
What is it, Jordan?
Cynefin is a Welsh word that translates as place or habitat.
Yes,
Cynefin.
Cynefin.
it's a
Cynefin.
brilliant framework, and it really helps leaders to understand that you cannot solve a complex issue by bringing in all these experts and waiting for them to agree. That's just the data that you need for a complicated problem, but you still have to make the decisions yourself. In complexity, there's a lot of trial and error to see and to sense what's going on.
And there must be a lot of ego involved in that as well, particularly when you've got people that aren't agreeing with each other. You know, if you've got someone who wants to make a mark on the company, maybe,
Mm.
or, you know, make their stamp, I can imagine that you've got a lot of people in your ear saying, "No, listen to me, listen to me. I've got the best idea."
Yeah.
It's a lot of prestige in that. But the thing is that if you have a high level of psychological safety or a very, very low level of psychological safety, it might look the same and it might, sound the same. Because if, for example, in my startups, we have a super high level of psychological safety. If you hear us discuss or debate a strategy, then from the outside, it will seem like we're really in each other's faces and disagreeing tremendously. But that's the thing that we sometimes get wrong when it comes to psychological safety, is that we think it means that we need to be nice to each other. Psychological safety is not about a niceness culture where I apologize for existing and then you say something and I apologize for almost interrupting you, and then it's like we walking on eggshells. Like, that's not psychological safety. Psychological safety means that if we're planning something and we have a high level of psychological safety, I will say this is how I want to start the workshop, and someone I work with will then say that, no, Patrick, I think that's bullshit, and I don't think we should start that way. It's like stupid, and we'll set the wrong tone. And then after 45 minutes, we agree on something, and we leave the meeting, and we're okay. We respect each other. It doesn't mean that I will be backstabbing that person for the next 2-3 months, the meetings that we have, or get some payback in some way the next time we design something. And that's the big difference, because if you have a low level of psychological safety, you will either be very, very, very quiet, or you will fight because you don't trust each other. If you have a high level of psychological safety, you can go at each other and be furious. And then after that, you realize that, wow, we really thought differently on that point. Wow. And again, it doesn't mean that we go after that meeting and say, thank God, now we're best friends. I have people that I respect tremendously, but we're not pals hanging out, but we have super high level of psychological safety. It means that there's the element of trust and the element of respect. That's what you need so much about, because one thing about complexity that we talked about before is it's a much more complex area that we move in when we talk about leadership. The world is no longer as predictable, and it's becoming less predictable every year, which means that as a leader, you don't have to deal with complex issues maybe 10% of your time. You have to deal with complex issues 40, 50, 60% of your time, 80% of your time if you're in certain businesses. You had the pandemic, and then when that shit was over, it was like suddenly you had all these logistics issues because you had congestion in every major port. You had stuff like inflation coming out of nowhere. Nobody planned for that. And then when that is going down, suddenly you have wars everywhere. So there are so many unknowns and so many unknown unknowns that you cannot be a leader today and say that I leave complexity to the academics. You need to have, super hands-on tools for how do I deal with problems by categorizing them. What kind of domain is this? Is it complex? This is the toolbox. Boom. Did I say boom?
Mic drop.
I have 2 extra mics here in the studio and microphones just so I can do proper mic drops without losing audio. You know?
So what would you say, because you've obviously mentioned psychological safety, what would you say are the big bits of advice you would give for fostering that kind of environment where people do feel psychologically safe? If that's not too big and complex to unpack.
No, it's actually super simple. If you think it, you should go first. And either you go first in a group or you go first with a person where you say that we actually need to deal with this. So you can address it by just, again, first truth. I don't know how to talk to you about this, but I think that we need some sort of like higher trust or whatever that psychological safety trendy thing is. I mean, if you say that as a first truth and then say, so how can we work on this? And if they say, we don't need psychological safety, I'm good. I can say anything and you will shut up. Then you have a different problem that you have to work. So if that's your manager, then you have to have evidence of when it's cost your team or your working relationship, when it actually cost you something. When did you lose momentum because you didn't have psychological safety? When did you act on the wrong data because you didn't have enough psychological safety? And whenever people say that, I experience a lot of psychological safety, so maybe you should just try speaking your will, saying what you want to say. When people say stuff like that, it just means that they don't get the concept. I mean, psychological safety doesn't mean that I can say whatever I want to without fearing repercussions. It means that we both can say that, or the whole team. Dr. Tim Clark, he wrote a book called The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. It came out in March 2020, which is a terrible month for a book launch. Everybody was thinking pandemic, and his book launched. So this book has kind of flown under the radar for a couple of years still. This book, it actually gives you the framework, the tools to work with increasing the psychological safety up to the holy grail, which is challenger safety, where the weakest person in the room can challenge the most powerful person in the room without risking repercussions. And Dr. Tim Clark, he actually coined a definition of psychological safety that I really like, which is that you create an environment of rewarded vulnerability. So an environment of rewarded vulnerability, meaning that if you are vulnerable, if you're saying something that you feel that, this will break the good mood, then you're rewarded, not just tolerated, but rewarded. Doesn't mean niceness that, now you said something difficult and then everybody must adapt. But it means that if someone, sticks their neck out, they should be rewarded for that behavior. Not punished, not tolerated, but rewarded. And if a leader doesn't see this, if a leader cannot, reinforce this and say, I don't agree, but I'm so damn proud that you actually mentioned that, because I wouldn't have done that when I was new, and I think you're fantastic for it. So it doesn't mean that you have to change your opinion because someone takes a risk and are vulnerable. It means that we need to reward that behavior and show them that this carries no repercussion. You are rewarded. An environment of rewarded vulnerability. And we're actually seeing that a lot of organizations, they are now starting to recruit leaders based on how good they are, proven track record of being able to build psychological safety in teams, and also being remunerated. So they get the bonuses based on how good their team perceive the psychological safety of the team. That's a powerful move because it says that there are so many dimensions today of a modern organization where you need to have psychological safety, because we're entering into a world where AI exists. We're entering into a world where we don't know if our logistic routes are going to work next year. We don't know if, when, how the next pandemic is going to see. We need people who can move fast and change their opinion fast if they see new evidence. Plain English, you need people who can deal with complexity, and for that you need so much more psychological safety than what you have in a typical organization today. And it's not rocket science, Jordan. It's like we said, begin with just being vulnerable yourself, or begin by having these super simple. You can call them icebreakers, or like let's have a weird little check-in exercise, and let's everybody mention something that nobody else in the team knows about them. Maybe some old hobby or something like that. And if you do that systematically, people will run out. They cannot say that they like golf 5 times in a row. So eventually they will feel that I will need to go deeper. And that will build psychological safety in your team, always.
Is part of it as well that you have to feel like you can change something by expressing your opinion? Because let's say I work for you, Patrick, and I'm always saying, "Oh, Patrick, I think we should do it like this. I think we should do it like this." And every time you say, "Jacob, I'm so glad you voiced your opinion. It's very brave of you to say that to me." Da da da. But then you never put anything that I suggest into practice. Probably, I will start to feel like there's no point in saying anything because nothing's going to happen anyway. Is that part of psychological safety as well, or is that something different?
It doesn't have to be that it comes to a yes, but I would have 2 different solutions for that. If I work with you, I would say you have to reflect on this pattern and point this pattern out to Patrick. So to say that maybe as a first truth, I get a feeling that every time I come to you, Patrick, and I give you good ideas, you say that it's really nice that I say that, but I also sense that you never act on them. So help me understand how you're thinking. So I would, if I worked with you, I would push you to claim that space. If I worked with myself, and this is weird meta in my head, but if I worked with myself in that same situation, I would say psychological safety, it means that he needs to feel safe and rewarded for his vulnerability. When he sticks out his neck, he has new ideas. How often do you act on those ideas, Patrick? And then I would say, never. Say, why not? So, because then if I say, because it's better, if you want it done properly, you should do it yourself. Then that's where I put the crowbar.
Or it might be that, oh, Jacob's ideas are always terrible and we need to fire him.
If Patrick answers, because Jacob's ideas are terrible, and then I would say, okay, Patrick, what have you done actively to support Jacob in developing better idea making skills? What have you done to help him get out of that slump? Because nobody is broken, nobody needs to be fixed. You just got to leverage his strength. So, Patrick, what have you done to leverage Jacob's strengths? And why are you not getting ideas from him? So most of the time, it's like there's nothing wrong with person 1 or person 2. It's just that in that dynamics, you're stuck in a pattern, which means that after 4 or 5 ideas, maybe Patrick would miss a really brilliant idea, because the moment I see you enthusiastically coming to me with an idea, I go, okay, psychological safety, I will reaffirm his idea, but I will just, sweep it under the carpet and hope that he doesn't, I don't even give you the benefit of the doubt of listening to that idea, which could be brilliant. Then we're stuck in that pattern. A lot of the stuff that we need to do is about pattern interrupts. How do we break patterns? Because it becomes, again, from a neuroscientific perspective, it's a conditioned response. It's a Pavlovian response. And you know this, that sometimes you have the colleagues, if they come to you, you give them the benefit of the doubt because you're in a pattern where they have really delivered. So sometimes you accept some of their crazy apehead ideas because you give them too much benefit of the doubt, because you're in that pattern. So maybe you should look at that a little bit more critical. And then you have the other people that you don't give the light of the day, because you just see them and you immediately think, can I get out of this situation in 5 minutes, or does it have to take 10? And unfortunately, we have a lot of these patterns. So usually when I try to get people to look at their teams or the people they work with, I try to get them to say what's the strengths of the other person that you have a relational dynamic with, and just figure out what is it that I am maybe not leveraging a lot from this person, and also looking at the weaknesses. Because sometimes people have weaknesses that are not really weaknesses. It's just shadows. Huh? If someone has a strength, that strength will have a shadow. If you're forceful, people will give you feedback that you step on people's toes. If you are, you love processes, then people will sometimes say, not everything needs, process facilitation in the plan. If you are empathetic, people will say that you're a bit mushy. Those are shadows of strengths. And the reason we are sometimes annoyed, I mean, I'm sometimes annoyed with my CFO because everything is about Excel charts and numbers, but that's what she's good at. And that's what I need her for. So maybe I should stop thinking that, oh, not another Excel chart, and instead say, you're freaking fantastic. It's good. I'm sorry if I'm annoyed, but because I hate Excel charts, but I really love that you apparently love them. Yeah. Because otherwise we tend to reject people who are not like us in teams and in organizations. We repel them because we are allergic to the stuff that is actually just a shadow of their strength, the stuff that they bring to the table that makes us whole. That's the stuff. That's why we need to look at each relationship in order to figure out, how do I leverage their strength instead of complaining about these tiny shadows that they also have.
It sounds like, yeah, it can be a lot of projection, can't it? Of like,
Mm.
well, that's not really how I do it. So that's
Mm.
not really what I like. So no, thank
That's
you. Yeah.
Here's the thing: we always project. We are never fully aware of all of our biases, and that's a difficult thing because we're so full of biases. There are so many biases in every dynamic, every social dynamic, and sometimes we speak about them, and sometimes we don't. And so it's kind of like, if you are able to ask yourself that question, Jordan, then that puts you ahead of the curve massively, to be able to say, am I projecting here? That self-reflection, that
Mm.
self-reflection will mean that you have an opportunity to be aware of your patterns, which means that you can go into the next meeting with that person thinking that, oh, yeah, now I'm about to project. Let's stop that. Let's nip it in the bud right here and instead try something different. Now, ideally, if you have identified a pattern, like, wow, I'm always projecting my own insecurities, or I'm always projecting that I don't want to do tasks that people delegate to me, if I'm projecting that, so I don't delegate to that person because I'm afraid that they will be exactly like me, then that's a pattern that I need to break. So, what's the stuff that I'm going to replace it with? Because it's much easier if you have a new habit, a new behavior, that you can replace an old habit or behavior that is no longer serving you. And trust me, you will figure that out every 4 or 5 years. You'll realize that this shit that was so great, that made me so successful up to this level, is the exact same behavior that is holding me back from moving up to the next level. And it doesn't have to be a hierarchy in a career. It can be about your personal development.
So, Patrick, tell us a bit about your companies and how you apply what you teach, obviously, in your courses to your own companies.
So the foundation is really to work a lot with psychological safety. That's like, if I'm going to talk about what I do internally, I try to be more vulnerable than I am outside my companies. And what I have is, so I have one company that is the boutique leadership developer, and that's Perfect Life. And I call it Perfect Life because I know that it's super provocative. Some people say that, oh, that's impossible. I say, yeah, but I think everyone should gun for it, and say that I want my life to be as perfect as it can be. And in my life, for example, it means to accept a lot of imperfection. It means that I have to accept that there's a lot of stuff that I will never figure out. But I will never stop trying to figure out new stuff, like AI, for example. So in Perfect Life, there's a small constellation of 8 people, consultants that I work with. I swore that I would never have employees because I'm very absent. I love being out with groups. I love being on the road. I love doing workshops and seminars and all of that. And the precious time that I'm not on the road, I don't want to be in an office. So I want to be at home instead. So that means that I'm not very good at being a hands-on manager. So I swore that I wouldn't have anyone on the payroll. So now there are 3, 4, including myself. And what I usually go for is part-time workers, because they have so many other things that I want to realize and accomplish, that they will give me half time, and that half time will be the best half. I'm sure of that. And whenever we have an assignment, I have a very small knitted group of co-creators that I work with, and we deploy in different organizations. So it's usually myself and someone else, or 2 other people. We love working in pairs, in duos, because then one person can be front and center, and the other can sort of monitor and read the room, so that it's much faster to adapt. If I'm trying to explain a theory and a method and answering questions, then it's difficult for me to at the same time read the room the same way that if we're 2 people. So that's perfect life. And altogether, it's 7, 8 of us, and very tightly knit. And then leadership arts. We have, of course, Eric, Caroline, and Luis, and also Anessa, who is based in Sarajevo, which is, again, one of these weird things where you have part-time fantastic star. The same thing there is when we need expertise that is not ours, we don't bend over backwards to pretend that we are capable of it. Instead, we just say, let's bring someone in who has exactly this expertise. So 2 small companies, and like I said, it should be 1.
Well,
Again,
the cat's out of the bag now.
Mainly it's because I'm a very reluctant manager, which means that I'm not a good CEO. I don't want to be that. I want to be a lead trainer out in the field. That's what I love. And when I'm there, and I mean, Jacob, just for the sake of connection, I mean, you were a participant in one of my trainings, and that's how we got to know each other. And you've seen me. I love doing what I do. So everything that is about admin, it sucks the soul out of my system. so, so for me, it's really about, if I'm serious about constantly wanting to create a life that is as perfect as possible for me and for the people around me, it means that I have to ask myself, what's exactly what I want, and then go for that. And ask the people around me, what's exactly what you want, and go for that. So that we try to, end up in dream jobs, all of us. I really like that, because I've listened to this podcast, and I really like the concept of asking people, after talking to them about their career, to ask them, what about the dream job then? And go like, oh shit. And I was specifically impressed when I suddenly heard someone say cricket. It was to me like, oh, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah,
that was
we've
a
noticed
nil
that
in
trend as well,
episode
haven't we?
10.
Yeah.
And that was definitely, because I don't think he'd mentioned cricket at all, even in the
Oh.
context of his personal
Yeah.
life up until that point. So it was just out of the blue, and I love it whenever that
Yeah.
happens.
Because for me, it's always been like, I've had these 2 voices in my head. One of them was, being a chef. That's my so when I started listening to this pod, I actually started thinking about, oh crap, I'm gonna get that question, which means that I have to ask myself, because I literally think I have my dream job. I know that because I can, if I get tired and weary, I can scale down. I can still do 2 days of workshops per week instead of 5. I can travel less, or I can travel to just 1 or 2 sites. I can say that, no, I only take assignments in Barcelona. I'm sorry. And I mean, I have that luxury, but if it weren't that, my plan B has always been, cooking and being a chef. So ideally, I would find a place to combine these 2 and say, I have no reservations for the evening because we only have lunch and, coffee breaks. That's what we cook for. And by the way, you're going to go through a process when you're in this restaurant. So you should start opening your souls, because now it's psychological safety, baby. But I'm guessing that's just a pipe dream.
Well, we had we in episode 5, our guest Fran. She was a chef for part of her career, and she said that the appeal of it was to travel to lots of amazing places and meet lots of amazing people.
Mm.
So, in a way, that was the primary driver for her, rather than the love of the craft, which she did also have. It was
Yeah.
made 10 times better by the fact that it came along with that.
And I think that's kind of what, because even though I'm a hardcore introvert, I really love meeting people and figuring out what are the mechanics of their hesitation. So when they're hesitating, why are they doing that? When they're procrastinating, why are they doing that? And if I'm with a leader, I'm trying to figure out what's holding you back from that, that thing that you want to accomplish as a leader. That gives me the same connection, I think, because I can connect with someone the same way that I would if I presented a dish and I said, I know you don't like cilantro. I do know that you're pretty fond of ginger. So I did a little tweak that's going to be fantastic for you. And I'm pretty sure that that would be how I would work as a chef, instead of saying, this is the pomodoro pasta that, take it or leave it. Yeah. I would try to tailor it to each damn customer to be happy.
Yeah.
So I probably found that happiness outside cooking because I'm so genuinely interested in people.
Well, maybe your dream job then is to be a leadership trainer, but to do the catering as well.
We'll now take a 1 hour break for lunch, and hang on, I'm just going to put on this white hat. Sorry, no, that's my apron. Sorry. So if you open these containers, you will see pasta. Yeah, I can see that. You know what? That's not a bad idea.
Maybe this will be the first episode we do where the guest actually goes and does the dream job afterwards.
It's not so far-fetched, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, you'd get in touch with them. You'd be talking to them beforehand, wouldn't you? And it would be quite easy to say, oh, yeah, I'll come and do this curriculum with you. And also, could everyone send me their dietary requirements and their
Yes.
favorite wine and their favorite herbs and things? And I'll see.
And I'll just pour that into the AI and say, talk to me about dishes now.
Yeah. See, we're blending it all together now.
What are the 3 mains and what are the starters and who should avoid what with pine nuts or whatever?
That could
And
be
you
a
could
good
even bring your
icebreaker.
big Italian barbecue with you as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
I actually can't. It weighs 350 kilos. So,
Wow, that is a
but I
beast
didn't say
of a
that.
barbecue.
I didn't say that to my wife when I ordered it.
Do you keep it on the lawn? Because I imagine it would just sink into the sink into the ground.
We have this wooden patio, and then Göran, our contractor, he said, I have to pour some concrete here if you want to have. You need a solid slab if you're going to put that monster. So there's a special part of 2 square meters of concrete that can hold an elephant, and it almost does.
Well, I guess in the dream job scenario, we could give you, you could have a private jet just for taking the barbecue with you, and then you can leave it down outside the conference center, and then at lunchtime.
I'll take that.
Yeah. The only other thing that I'm thinking it would be nice to work into the dream job is mountaineering.
I tried that. I had this
You
crazy.
tried that?
Yeah, I had this crazy scheme that I would take a management team and then we would walk a randonnée, which is that you walk on paths, but it's really high up and it's also pretty scary. And everyone is connected with a randonnée rope, which is like not a thick climbing rope, but it is a rope. It will hold a lot. And then I was thinking that people should walk in pairs, like connected with ropes, which would be symbolic, like we're doing this as a management team. And then we would have one question every hour. So I would just shout to everyone that Think about your strength as a management team. And they would then for 1 hour in pairs talk about this. And then maybe after 1 hour, I would say, now, what about your competition? How are they different? I had this plan that it would be really nice, and you could have like 8 questions for an 8-hour hike, and then you would camp, and it would be like sleeping in bivouacs. And do you think I got any customer to sign up for that? No. Apparently, that was too far out.
I guess you wouldn't have been allowed either. Your wife wouldn't have let you anyway.
No, but that was that was the thing. I said, it's not mountaineering per se. It's randonnée. It's like hiking in steep areas. We have like...
Yeah, very steep areas.
Yeah, in my mind, it felt like a really good idea, but it's like a lot of the ideas in my mind, they start as good ideas, and then I realize that, hang on, that's not working.
Well, I like the idea that you could maybe work in the food with that. So maybe every hour you ask them a question, and you go, and that you've got loads of birria tacos with you, and you go, and heads up, here's some tacos to keep you going.
Martha, duck. Throw it to all of them, and that's a recipe for disaster, I think.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty good. I think that it's so much the case that your career has been you giving yourself the power to decide to do what you want to do, and shifting and course correcting and changing so that you're making things ideal for yourself. So I think maybe more so than the average person, you definitely have already sort of created your own dream job situation. And
mind you, pairing up with people who have the ability to be as crazy, but from the other side. So it's really pairing up with people who don't think like me, but who are willing to go on the crazy ideas sometimes, and just, explore that before we shoot it down or continue with it.
Well, I feel excited because I really feel like there's wind in the sails of this idea for you to do what you already do, but do the catering as well. I hope you keep in touch with us and let us know if you actually give it a go.
Yeah.
You make a big paella in Barcelona.
Oh, now we're talking. Now we have geography also. So we have the concept, we have geography. We need some local contractors because I'm not hauling paella.
That needs another private jet, doesn't it? As well as one for the barbecue.
Private jet and fully staffed, because I'll need a lot of people for this. It's heavy barbecue, and also when we start fine tuning this idea, I promise it will get worse before it gets better. So lots of people, I think.
Yeah, we can sort that out. That's no problem. Is there anything else that's missing, do you think, from your dream job?
No, I think that's fine. When we nailed geography, I felt that Barcelona is willing to accept this. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's ready for it.
Well, if you're happy to shake on it,
we can,
Patrick.
Shake hand on that dream job. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Patrick. It's been extremely interesting episodes and very unique. We haven't had an episode like this before. I think that's so dense with theory. So I hope that the people listening have found it really interesting as well for whatever line of work they're in.
And I think as well, especially, it was so interesting to talk to you about careers, but also I feel like a lot of people listening will take a lot of what you said into their own work. Because generally we've spoken to people where we thought, it would be nice for someone to maybe find out about this job and maybe they'd be interested in this job. But I feel like for yourself, they'll take a lot of what you said on board in their own roles. So yeah, thank you for your time. It's been so interesting and a lot for me to consider as well.
I wish I could say that I could tell you some executive coaching, but really you can just get an AI and it will take care of that. 90% you're there. Sorry.
I think I'm going to spend the rest of the evening on ChatGPT.
Guys, it's been a pleasure to be on the pod. It's really, really nice talking to you.
Cool. Thank you, Patrick. Väl, Verdient et cool aufs nicht.
You're absolutely right, Jacob. That was a fun episode.
A very fun episode and a very fun dream job section there at the end. I have to say that was my favourite reaction that we've had so far when we suggest a dream job to him of him being a leadership coach but doing the catering, and there was a pause and he says, that's not such a bad idea. I love that.
Yeah.
I want to get to a point when every time we do an episode, that's what the guest is saying.
And I want to get to a point where every time someone thinks about listening to the Careers Mare podcast, they think, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah. And then they do it.
Yeah. And then they do it. And similarly, that they follow us on all our socials and they rate all of our podcast episodes 5 stars on all of their listening platforms. That's the point I want to get to.
Yeah.
I think that's my dream job.
Yeah. Well, now we've done your episode.
Yeah. Dead easy.
2 episodes in one.
But yeah, no, that was a really fun listen back and just a really enjoyable recording session. I thoroughly recommend that you check out Patrick. He does have a YouTube channel for Perfect Life where he posts short, sharp videos giving people advice on leadership and self-leadership. And yeah, he's on LinkedIn a lot of the time as well, posting a lot on there. So thoroughly recommend that you check his stuff out.
Yeah, absolutely. Our second international episode after Tessa Sterling, the Australian.
And who knows where we'll go next?
The moon.
Yes, to interview the cheese.
If the cheese is listening, our email address is info. If that sentient dishwasher or whatever it is from Wallace and Gromit's Grand Day Out is listening, you're welcome anytime. You've got a standing invitation. Is it a dishwasher?
Yeah, I think
no,
so.
it's not, is it?
No, it's a M911 pistol, isn't it?
No, it's some kind of kitchen appliance, isn't it? I think it's got drawers in it, doesn't it, actually? Just punching that up on screen.
Oh, it's a fridge.
Is it?
Yeah. Oh, no, it's a cooker. It's a cooker.
Right, okay.
Yeah, it's a cooker. Jacob, it's a cooker. Okay.
Well, Mr. Cooker, you're welcome. If you ever get tired of skiing, then you know where to find us.
Yeah. And all the best to all the cookers out there. Really standing invitation to any cookers. Gas, electric, fan, induction hobs. We're very open and welcoming on this pod.
Yeah, we say that now. We're laughing now, but I bet you it's not long until cookers will be sufficiently augmented by artificial intelligence that they will be able to go on podcasts.
And I, for one, can't wait.